Welcome to day 153. We are looking at Proverbs chapters 22 to 24 and Romans chapter 14 today. Chapter 22 is focusing on wisdom and having a humble attitude and a concern for others. It really is emphasizing about how selfishness goes against social responsibility and that we need to find a balance between our own desires and needs and the desires and needs of our community. Chapter 23, there's a lot here that's very similar to an ancient Egyptian document. There's a lot of advice for how to have a successful life, and this is quite similar across cultures and religions, even where religious doctrines may differ. The general wisdom about the common sense of how to live a good life is quite consistent across this. And so, a lot of the things that the different cultures at this time we're looking at is what is the balance between the self and the group? How do we live together? When do we conform? When do we face consequences for the choices that we have made? Chapter 24 is talking about hard work and has illustrations, especially from the area of agriculture, which of course would have been the primary economic basis back then. And it uses agriculture to show the impacts of laziness and the value of hard work. There's a focus here on a life of honesty and commitment. Now, there are some traditions within United States history that have really emphasized some of the verses from here to really emphasize the need for hard work. But sometimes our application of this has gone a little far and has indicated that people who are unable to work hard for some reason are somehow deficient and less than. So we do need to be careful about how we apply this in different situations. As we turn to Paul's writing to the Romans, there's a lot in chapter 14 that's still pretty important today. We are still struggling with how are we a united church when we have people from different cultures and generations with different experiences and different interpretations of Jesus' teaching and the Word of God through the Bible. Paul reminds us that we are not to be judging, that is God's job, that we may not all agree with each other all the time, but we can still be the church and be working together. He points out that we live and we die for God and that we are to respect each other's choices. A big thing here that Paul puts before us that I think we struggle with is that Paul calls us to not put stumbling blocks in the way of other people. And I think we often find ourselves falling into this trap of thinking that we've got all the answers or our approach is the only approach or the right approach, and then we really cause problems for some other people, especially new believers as they're trying to come to know God in their lives. One of the areas that there are often stumbling blocks from one person in front of another comes to food choices. Now, back then, the Jewish people had a certain food tradition from the Old Testament, especially the book of Leviticus. These days we call it kosher, staying kosher. But of course, in Jerusalem, in the Roman Empire, there were people from all sorts of different backgrounds who had all sorts of different dietary traditions. And Peter got a vision from God that said, you know what? Those kosher dietary laws, there's a time and place for them. That's not what's important now. Everything God made is good, clean food, and you can eat any food with anyone, anywhere, anytime. But this arguing over what can we eat and when and who can we eat with, frankly, it sounds a lot like today. We have people on keto diets and paleo diets and vegan diets, gluten-free diets for a lot of different reasons. And we often still struggle with gathering together and eating together and frankly judging each other for the food choices that we're making. I think we have the same issues about bickering and arguing over food, even though these details of the food might be different. We're still often having problems gathering around a table. So I think Paul really challenges us to try and figure out how can we just enjoy being with people and not argue over the food that we're eating? How can we respect each other and make arrangements so that we can be together? In verse 19, he points out, let's strive for the things that bring peace and build each other up instead of focusing on the things that divide us and separate us. And that is wisdom as good for today as it was in Paul's time. So thanks for reading today, and we'll see you next time.